Hello again. This video is hopefully going to be a quick one as well. This one's about speciation and particularly about sympatric speciation, as that sounds like the one that people have had some issues with. So hopefully this should clarify it somewhat. I know there was a few misconceptions about it during the SAC, so let's get straight into it. Obviously, speciation, we're talking about organisms that have become reproductively isolated, and when they come back into contact with each other, they cannot produce fertile offspring. That's essentially what speciation is. And there's two main types that we talk about. One is allopatric speciation, the other is sympatric speciation. Allopatric means different homelands. So that is very straightforward. That's where we have geographical isolation occurring. So let's say a mountain or a river or whatever splits members from the same species, who then go and adapt and survive and reproduce in their specific area. And over time, they change and they adapt to different environmental conditions, different selection pressures. Then they change so much that when they eventually come back in contact with each other, they can't reproduce. Very simple. We've got our Galapagos finches that are the example you should know for your exam, but you should be able to apply that to many different situations, and that should be pretty straightforward. If there's geographical isolation, it is allopatric speciation. Sympatric speciation is different. That is where our members of the species are not categorically geographically isolated. So what does that mean? It means that they are in the same spot. Okay, and that can be really confusing to some people. And when you first hear it, it does sound very confusing, but it's actually not too hard to understand. Now, before we get on to that, I want to highlight this because this is a real point of misconception. That is our methods of isolation. So you can get prezygotic or postzygotic, which basically means pre-mating or post-mating. Prezygotic includes pretty much everything temporal, geographical, anything like that. That's all barriers to finding and securing a mate. So you're preventing those zygotes from even coming into contact, or gametes from coming into contact with each other. That covers most of our examples. So you can just see Wally scratching himself. Wally, trying to make a video here. No respect for BioBoost. Anyhow, we've got our postzygotic, which are things like hybrid sterility. So when a horse and a donkey try to mate, they make a mule. Yep, it can live, but it's not going to be able to reproduce further. So that's a postzygotic mechanism. That's why they're not part of the same species. Now, a lot of people seem to think that, there's some misconceptions, I guess, about, allopatric being prezygotic and then sympatric being postzygotic. Don't worry about that. Most of the time, it's prezygotic mechanisms that we're talking about in both allopatric and in sympatric. Okay, if it's temporal isolation, it's prezygotic. If it's geographical isolation, it's prezygotic. Okay, so don't be too concerned about that. Now, the example that you have to know for sympatric is the Howea palms. But I'm going to talk about these mice examples first, just to get us settled with sympatric. So imagine you've got this mouse population here. Okay, it's a whole bunch of brown mice, and they all come out during the day and they eat their food, and then that's it. Okay, great. Now imagine variation arises in the population that there's a black mouse. Okay, or we'll use this one. There's a white mouse. Okay, imagine that white mouse is better at hunting during the day than the brown mouse, and the brown mice tend to hunt further towards dusk or nighttime. Now, that's fine from the beginning. There's still some gene flow between these two mice. They're still part of the same species. But over time, as the mutation for being white grows in the population, the variation arises, these mice tend to spend more time hunting during the day, and the brown mouse spends more time hunting during the night. Okay? That continues on, and over a long period of time, you get this real distinction between the brown mice hunting at night and the white mice hunting during the day. And that can become so significant that they start not really interacting much at all, and gene flow starts to dry up between these two populations until such time that the white mouse is only basically, breeding with other white mouse, and brown mice are only ever breeding with brown mice until such time, and this can take a long, 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 long time, that they become two entirely different species. Okay, different selection pressures, different environmental pressures, and over time they arise. More mutations arise, more differences in their genes and everything like that. But they become so different they can no longer interbreed when they come back into contact with each other. Okay, that is speciation. That is sympatric speciation. Okay. Now keep in mind that example when we talk about the Hawiya palms, which is the example that you need to know for the exam. So, read into that. They'll probably ask a question about it. Now, you don't need to know the specifics of the soil types and everything like that, but it doesn't hurt to know. Okay? So essentially we've got this ancestral Hawiya palm that colonizes Lord Howe Island. Okay? And there's volcanic soils and, let's say, sandy soils. This grey soil and the yellowy soil. And they can grow in both. Okay? Now, notice that at this point, they all look the same. They're all the same type of palm. But here's the rub. Over time, these different soils are going to confer different benefits. So whether that's, let's say, different bacteria that grow in the soil, whether that's, let's say, the amount of nutrients in the soil, all those types of things. Now, over time, that might mean that the ones in the volcanic soils, maybe they grow really well and they've got really good bacteria and they start to flower much earlier because they're getting all this really good growth. Now, if they flower much earlier, what that means is that, they're trying to find mates at a different time of year than the ones in the sandy soil. So that's temporal isolation. Remember, that is a prezygotic mechanism. Now, over time, they're only breeding with ones that flower at that time of year. Sandy soils are, flowering and breeding at a different time of year. Then you can see that over time, even though these trees are living side by side, you may have them flowering and reproducing at completely different times of year. That ends up leading to a whole new species. Okay? And once they, if they were to, they are already next to each other, but now they can't reproduce. Okay? So hopefully that clarifies, what sympatric speciation is, and hopefully clarifies some of the misconceptions that some people may have about it. I think Wally's eating a rock, so I might need to go get that off him. Have a lovely rest of the day, and I'll see you next time. See you later.